Hello everyone, my name is Carl. Welcome to my workshop and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this episode, which is going to be Rover gas turbine number 12, it's amazing really, 12 already, we finish off dismantling the Rotax rotary actuator, or Rotaxuator if you prefer. We get the bearing out of the armature end, we get this pinion stub shaft out, we get some of the corrosion removed from the carcass, and I finally finish removing corrosion from the other two pieces, the end flange and the housing for the micro switches. I really hate corrosion. It's really gone to town on that component. It is absolutely insidious. It's just, it represents chaos, basically, corrosion. I think, we think of the human race and the endeavors that we've done over the course of our history. We've removed the bauxite from the ground, we've taken the aluminium out of it, we've used our brains and our brawn and ingenuity to come up with technology harnessing the forces of nature. We've smelted that bauxite, we've got the aluminium, we've made it into alloys, and then corrosion comes along and tries to undo all that hard work that we've done. So anyway, we score a minor victory against it today. So I hope you enjoy anyway, and without further ado, let's get on with it. So where are we at today? Well, we're back on with the actuator, and yesterday I did a little experiment. I tried some built Hamber Deox-C on the corrosion on these magnesium alloy parts. I just used a very low concentration of solution. Now, built Hamber Deox-C is basically citric acid. So I put these in a small tub of the built Hamber solution, and it's not done too badly taking off the corrosion. There's a few bits and pieces that we need to abrade, but did a reasonably good job, I think. So I've got some etch primer on order, spray etch primer, so we can, once we've got all these cleaned up, we can paint them. But today's job is going to be back on the carcass assembly. So we need to get this pinion and its attendant bearing out. In order to do that, we need to get down inside there, which is difficult to see inside, but I've shown you that before. We need to get those field coils out in order to get down into the bottom of there to remove the circlip. So we need to get these screws out to do that, and they're staked. I'll try and zoom in on that and show you. That's how they've been locked. They've been staked. So I did have a putative attempt at trying to get those screws out, and they didn't want to budge. I am going to have one more go just to try and see if I can remove them without getting destructive. And if I can't, then I shall just drill the heads off them as though they were rivets, and then we'll get the field coils out and just replace the screws, because I'm pretty convinced that they are 6BA. So let's have a go now, and we'll try and remove them conventionally, and if not, we will get a little bit more invasive. So I've just managed a little bit of success. I've managed to get that screw there turning. I'll just zoom in on it a little bit for you. That one there, look, I've just turned it about 3/4 of a turn, and it's loose now. And I did that using this little bit, which is a really good fit in the slot. That was the problem. I think I couldn't get something that would fit in the slot and give me enough torque. So, and I held that in that little ratcheting sort of handle there. And I'm not even making this stuff up. This and the handle are Parkside. And yeah, so there you go. Just goes to show you. So I'll now use a pick and various other bits and pieces to get the detritus and paint out of that slot. And if I zoom in on it, you can see it's staked. Can you see there, look? So I'll try and use maybe a small punch or something, an adapted chisel or something like that, just to try and get the staking out of the slot. And if we can clear that, it should come undone with the little screwdriver bit that I just showed you. So yeah, I think you can see that if it's in focus. It's given up. We've managed to get it working, get it moving with a combination of a little bit of perseverance and Parkside Tools. And no, they do not sponsor me. If only. So the success there was basically down to the fact that this bit is nicely ground with a nice flat edge. It's uniform, it doesn't taper, and so it was a really good fit in the slot. So let's carry on then and get these screws out and try to remove these field coils. So hopefully now these screws should turn without too much difficulty. So that's just spinning. Ah, right, that's why. I did think these might be a bit of a pain to get out, but it doesn't look like they're going to be. See if I can... Here we go. Let's see what kind of condition these things are in. Let's bring in the other cable out with it. So there is one of the field coils. I'll zoom you in so you can see it a bit better. Yep, so that's been shellacked or varnished, tropicalized, whatever you want to call it. Seems to be in pretty decent condition. It looks a bit gnarly, but that's because it's got this kind of almost like the varnish that's on it is almost like a potting compound. So what I'll do is I'll mark that up as to the side that it came out of from the carcass so that it goes in the right way, because these will be they're both wound to give opposing magnetic field, as I said before, because it's a split field motor. So we'll put that in the right way when we put it back together. So now I've got the field coil out, I can do what I was trying to do a few days ago and show you the inside of here a bit better. I mean, look at that, it's just horrible, isn't it? There's the screw, look, that secured the field coil in place. You can see the bearing, the bottom bearing there, and try and get it to focus properly. There's part of the circlip that holds it in, and you can just see all the corrosion products in there. Absolutely manky. Now, you know, back in the day when this was in RAF service, there's absolutely no way that anyone would have tried to have salvaged a component like this. They just would have gone to the stores and got a spare. And somewhere out there must be, you know, a huge spares inventory for these actuators, because there's a lot of them still flying around. But we do not have the luxury of that, so we're going to have to try to refurbish this as best we can and reuse it. So with both field coils removed, we get a much better view of the interior, and I don't actually know if I want to look at that, but there you go, it is what it is. So the next task will be to try and get that that bearing assembly down there that you can see with you can see part of the circlip. We'll try and get that out next. So what I'm going to try to do now is get this pinion out, and that pinion is on like a sort of a hollow shaft which passes through the bearing in a diameter, and I'll show you that now. I think it's going to be a lot easier. Well, you'll have seen it before actually, because I've shown you the inside of the carcass, but you can see there, look, that sort of little spigot sticking up from the bearing, that's the other end of the pinion, this pinion here, and that's the pinion that drives the main gear train in the gearbox. So I think it'll be easier to try and knock that out of the bearing while it's all still assembled into the carcass, because I can sit this down on something and then put a punch in there and tap that out. So I'll give that a go. I'm going to try and knock this pinion out now. What I've got the carcass sitting on is it's actually the outer race of an old taper roller bearing, and these are quite handy things to have around in the workshop. I use them as round parallels and this type of thing, and they're very good for this type of work. So I have a suitable punch. We'll put that down inside the carcass onto the pinion shaft, and I'm just using my favourite hammer for this type of thing. We'll just give it a knock and see what happens. Right, nothing's happening, so I'll have a rethink and bring you back. Right, let me get some light in here and you'll see the reason why nothing's happening, if I can get that to focus. I think that on the shaft there is a tiny little snap ring which is holding it in place. So the bearing has to come out, and then we knock the pinion shaft out of the bearing. It's not the best focused thing in the world, but I think you can see it. So I've managed to set the camera up so that we're looking down inside the motor carcass at the end bearing and the small stub shaft that passes through the bearing and has the pinion on the other side of it. I've managed to clean most of the corrosion out of the bottom of the carcass, certainly enough so that we can actually see what we're doing. And as I suspected, if you look at the stub shaft, you can quite clearly see that there is a tiny little snap ring on that. Now, judging by the position of the circlip, I would imagine the bearing comes out towards us. And that means that the pinion shaft has to come off first, because the pinion is on the other side of that plate that the bearing's through. That's how I think it should work anyway. So we're going to have a look at how we're going to get that little snap ring off there. So I'm working through the camera, so I might as well film it for you guys. I managed to pry up this part of the circlip, and I can get the hooked pick underneath it, and I'm going to try to convince it to come away from the rest of the groove. So it would have to have happened when the camera wasn't running, but I just put the 90-degree pick down there and just flicked underneath this end of the circlip, and it sprang out of the groove. So yep, I'm very happy with that. You didn't get to see it, but I'm happy. Yep, so the circlip is out, as I said, and also the shield of the bearing popped out with it. And look at the state of that bearing. Oh my giddy aunt. Now I've got to try and get that little, stay in focus, got to try and get that little snap ring off now. So I really wish you could see the lengths I'm going to try and do this. I've actually got a light on a tripod. I've got the camera sitting up on two cans of paint on the back of the vise. And then I've got the actual, the motor carcass in the vise. And I'm working through the camera, because it's the only way I can actually do this. So let's see if we can get that part held. So that's more than slightly embarrassing. I've just spent half an hour faffing around trying to work through the camera, and I just decided to give the bearing an exploratory tap, more out of frustration than anything else, when it transpired that these two bits come apart like this. That's just pressed in there. So I'll bring you back when I've got that snap ring off. So I thought you'd want to be around for the denouement. I mean, it absolutely did its job, that thing. It really did. It was determined not to let that shaft come out. And still is. There, it's off. Oh, thank goodness for that. What a task that was. Right, let's see if we can get the stub shaft out now. So now that that clip's off, I think this is almost going to push out. Well, maybe not. I think it's going to need a tap. Let's see if we can provide it with one. Just shift here so you can see what I'm doing. Put that screwdriver in there and just tap the end of that screwdriver perhaps. I think it's going to need something a little bit more percussive. Right, you're in a different location now. You should still be able to see what I'm doing. Actually, you can see better. So let's tap this out. Yep, there it goes. Right, I think I might just be able to push that now. Yes. So, there it is. There's the stub shaft with the pinion on it. I'll show you it closer in a minute. So as suspected, the bearing definitely comes out this way, and I have reason to believe that, good reason to believe, that it might even just push out by hand. Yep, there it goes, with a 3/16 socket. So there it is, and it's looking very sorry for itself. I'll show you that a bit closer in a minute. So there we are. That's the carcass. The final main assembly of the actuator is disassembled, and you can see I've been in there earlier on today with a Scotch Brite pad like I described for the other bits and pieces, and it's looking slightly less like Alexander Fleming's Petri dish, but it's still not great, but it'll clean up. What that dowel is for there, that sort of bent dowel, I'm not too sure. There is evidence of it protruding on this side. You can just about see it. I'll try and point to it. There, look. I think that's the other end of it. The only thing I can think of is that that was for this part that fits, that slides over. It must have been to locate it, to stop it from rotating. But it wasn't engaged in there when I took this off. When I realised it came off, it was, well, it must have been, mustn't it? Because it can't have been on any other way. Yeah, so that must be what that's for. It must be to stop that from rotating, to locate it. I can't get it apart now. There we are. Yeah, so that must have been in there because it wouldn't go on otherwise. But I haven't done anything to that to bend it, so it must have already been bent. Anyway, that's that. Then we have the stub shaft with the pinion on it. And you can see there, look, it's got two flats on it, and they engage with a corresponding slot machined in the end of the armature shaft, or rather there's a sleeve on the end of the armature shaft that has a slot in it that fits over that. And then the journal for the bearing is here, and that's where that truculent little snap ring was in there that put up such a good fight. So that's the pinion that goes on the armature. And here is the bearing that we took out. And I'll zoom in on it a little bit so you can see it. As you can see, it is utterly horrendous. Yeah, and it doesn't turn. The reason why the pinion was spinning was because it was turning in the inner diameter. So that's not good, is it? Not good at all. Yeah, so that's completely seized up. And it's the same bearing as was at the opposite end of the armature. So I've got a couple of these on order anyway, so they should be coming soon. Today I spent cleaning these components, and after a lot of faffing around with ultrasonic baths and various different acids like phosphoric acid and acetic acid and citric acid, I just went back to the old standby route, or the old faithful, of just getting some Scotch Brite, something abrasive, getting it in some soapy water to get a bit of lubrication and a bit of mild solvent action, and I just went at it for an hour. And then I got various picks like this one, and just got in there and dug all the corrosion out of the pits. And it was a little bit like working on an old school Mini, doing the rear subframe. You just hit it with a pointy thing until it stops being soft, and then you've got all the corrosion out of it, and you know that it's knackered. So yeah, I mean, look inside there now. Again, it's looking less like a culture of in a laboratory and more like a metallic object. But you can see, I'll zoom in and you can really see just how much the corrosion has had its merry way in there. There's a few little bits still of corrosion that just need to be dug out there. Look, there's a bit there and just a few bits there, but I'll get round to them. And then on the other side of this piece, it's the worst of all. You can see, look at the size of that pit there, and there's another big one. That's the worst one, that one there. And then there's another slightly smaller one here, but it's not much smaller. And then there's a smaller one here, look. But, you know, we'll have to fill those in, basically. The fortunate thing is that none of this geometry is critical to the function of the unit. We're not dealing with, you know, things that are going to be curtailing the performance of it. We can fill that in with a bit of metal or aluminium putty and then just machine it back. I mean, we don't even really need to do that. That would be fine, but we're going to. So yeah, you know, we can leave it like that, but we'll know it's there, so we'll try and fix it in a better way. So that's that piece. That was the output flange, and then we have that's the piece that was where the micro switch plate was in there, and you can see there, look at how bad that is. I mean, it's really eaten away at that. But there are some really deep pits on this one, but they're small pinprick pits rather than these you know, these great craters that you've got on here. Looks like the surface of the moon, this one. But again, just working away at this with Scotch-Brite and a pick, just digging out the corrosive products from, or corrosion products rather, from the pits. And inside there where the cables ran, that was pretty difficult, but I managed to do it. And you can see around here, look, where the corrosion's just had its way. Again, that's crevice corrosion. So these are, once I get the few little stragglers of corrosion products out, I'll just give it one more final check to make sure that I've got it all. And then these things are ready to be etch primed. I've got some etch primer coming, should be here tomorrow. So I'll etch prime these. It's just spray etch primer, it's nothing special really. Once I've filled this damage in and machined it back, I'll etch prime them, and then they'll be ready for paint. And then I'll move on to cleaning the carcass. Now it's come apart the way it has. Well, I haven't shown you that yet, but I've kind of put a spoiler in there, but you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. But I think what I'll do is when they're etch primed, I think I'm going to paint this silver, because I saw one, I saw a 1S60 engine once in a museum, and it was sectioned, and the actuator was silver, and it looked really good. So I think that's what I'm going to do with this one. So people, that's the end of another film. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much for subscribing. Hopefully I'll get another one out for you tomorrow when we're doing some work with the aluminium putty, and perhaps we'll have the component in the lathe, the flange in the lathe, and we'll machine back the aluminium putty to a good surface. Who knows, we might even get some primer on it tomorrow. I also want to do a little bit more work on the engine tomorrow, on the main part of the engine, just taking off some pipe work and having a few more checks on that. So again, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for subscribing. If you're not subscribed, please consider doing so. I'd love to have you along, and please do give me a like. It seems to appease the gods of YouTube. You know, however that bizarre mechanism works, it seems to oil the wheels of it. So thank you very much for that. So that's all it remains for me to say is thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.